All right, I think we're ready to go. Welcome back, everyone, to ITI and Insights. Insights, the International Committee for IT Standards, is the ANSI-accredited SDO supported by ITI, the Information Technology Industry Council. I'm David Bain, the Insights Executive Director and your moderator today for our discussion of blockchain and distributed ledger standards. We've had roundtables on many interesting topics that relate to our standards committees for cybersecurity, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. And next month, please join us on November 10th for the discussion of quantum computing. You can see all of the Insights Standards Committees at insights.org/committees and click to participate in a committee of your interest or expertise. Give us a shout with any questions about how your organization can participate. A little bit of housekeeping first. Let's say special thanks to all of our friends at ANSI who have helped get the word out about our roundtable discussions, especially including Liliana Buchstein. Special thanks to ITI participants, Christine Reck, Ashley Barang, at Insights, Lynn Barra, and Zamalan Munkjorgal. Also like to especially recognize and thank the committee chair of our blockchain committee, John Greaves. So our roundtable discussion today is not Chatham House rules. It is on the record. However, per our custom with these roundtables, unless otherwise specifically stated, all the statements and opinions expressed are presumed to not be a position of everyone's respective organizations. So that goes as well for our virtual audience participants. You're very much part of our discussion, so please submit your questions and we'll get to as many as we can. You're an important part of this conversation. Before I introduce our distinguished panelists, I will read the scope of the committee and then we will dive into panelist introductions, a few questions, followed by your questions. So here is the committee scope. The Insights Blockchain Technical Committee is focused on the development of national and international standards in the domain of blockchain and distributed ledger technology systems. Main areas of focus are, number one, foundational aspects of blockchain as vocabulary, architecture, security, privacy, and identity for blockchain and DLT, interoperability of blockchain and distributed ledger technology systems, smart contracts and their applications, governance, use cases, and other applications of blockchain and DLT. We'll also note that the Insights Blockchain Committee is the US tag to ISO Technical Committee 307 and all of its working groups. In this capacity, it proactively participates in all of ISO TC 307 activities. So we have four distinguished panelists today, two from NIST, one from Intel, and we're especially honored to have the CEO of Wishnish, who will be the best but last panelist today. So let's start with NIST, go to Intel, and then Wishnish. So I'd like to welcome Dylan Yeaga, who is a computer scientist and researcher at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. In his past decade of work, he has worked in the field of biometrics, operating system security, formalized software testing methods, and blockchain technologies. Dylan is a technical expert in the International Standards Organization, ISO, for subcommittees such as SC37 for biometrics and technical committees such as TC 307 for blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. For the past several years, Dylan has been investigating blockchain technologies as the blockchain program leader for the Computer Security Division of NIST. Dylan, you can unmute yourself and join us. We welcome you. I'd also like to especially thank you for serving in the committee and for your service with the U.S. government. Let me start off by asking you, since the first area of business in any of our standards committee is drilling down to the terminology. It's so important that as we discuss these things that people are referring to, they are in agreement about what the terminology refers to. So what do you consider the key terms? And for that matter, what is the difference between blockchain and distributed ledgers?
Okay, so I would specify essentially that a blockchain is a subset of distributed ledgers. And so it's essentially one type of distributed ledger that you could have. Others would be like a directed acyclic graph would be another type. But the distributed ledger is essentially a digital ledger that is shared between the various different participants of the system in a non-centralized way. It could be directed either individually to peers or through organizations. They have some method of reaching a consensus, which most people, you'll hear a consensus algorithm, your proof of work, or proof of stake, round robin, or some other Byzantine consensus mechanism. And the data is usually geographically dispersed. So it's not in one location, not hosted on one particular server in somebody's data center. It's all spread around the world essentially. And so a blockchain being a specific type of distributed ledger essentially takes various different transactions and bundles them into blocks, and then cryptographically bonds it with the previous block, and then posts it to the ledger for everyone to download and to see. So
would you say that the blockchain is a constituent part of the distributed ledger? It's a
instantiation of that type of data. So a blockchain is just one type of distributed ledger that you could have.
Are there other key terms that have come up in the discussions in the blockchain committees?
So many of them have an overlap with cryptographic terms, and for the most part, cryptographic hashing algorithms are one thing that comes up because they're very central to the various different blockchain protocols out there. A lot of the proof of work schemes use different hashing algorithms. Digital signatures are another that often come up, but they're defined better in the cryptographic groups that they're in, but they do come up in blockchain areas because they are so widely used in blockchain and distributed ledgers.
Very good. On the topic of computer security, it seems like cybersecurity has never been so important as it is now. There's been a spike in ransomware and other cyber attacks that's coincided with the entire world's rapid leap forward in digital transformation. In other words, just when we've become more dependent and relying on our digital infrastructure, we have this spike in threat. How do you see the future of blockchain in the context of computer security?
So blockchains and distributed ledgers, by large, they remove central points of attack and essentially change the attack surface to be placed on more individuals. So you'd have to be more locally targeted for an attack rather than just being a bystander in a large company's breach of data. And with you often see people getting ransomware attacks. Although they use cryptocurrencies as payment, it's not usually the fault of a blockchain. It's more the fault of whatever poor IT security system that the company or organization happen to have. Their servers that are on an old PC stuffed in someone's closet, gathering dust for the past 20 years, never seeing an update, stuff like that. So those are going to be an omnipresent thing. But with blockchains and stuff, and the Web3 philosophy of having everything blockchain based, and the onus put on individuals, and they're the owners of their data, and you have to go to them directly, also means you need to attack them directly. And you won't, like I said, you won't be able to just be passively gathered up in a breach of password leaks and data leaks from different organizations.
And one topic of the week is IoT security. I guess on the 19th, there was a meeting in the White House, a discussion about future cyber labeling standards for IoT devices, and the overall challenge of making these distributed devices somehow more secure. Do you think blockchain could play a role in securitizing the proliferating, billions of IoT devices?
So I have seen multiple projects that have attempted to essentially have IoT data fed into blockchain systems to improve security. There was a project being done by the Department of Energy called Blossom, BOLSEM, that was essentially doing this. And it was very successful from the last time that I had participated in the meetings. And so I do think that in very specific use cases, a blockchain or distributed ledger could be used to help improve the security of different IoT devices.
Very interesting. Well, don't go anywhere. It's not the end of the working day yet. Stand by. Let's bring Salvatore Francomacaro into the conversation, your colleague there from NIST. Sal, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on and unmuting your mic. Salvatore Francomacaro is a standards professional and cybersecurity and in cybersecurity and identity management subject matter expert. He has honed his expertise in 30 years of his career in both commercial companies and government agencies. His knowledge spans across many facets of cybersecurity, security tokens, identity management standards, and security policies. Sal has worked for 20 years in the standards world. He holds officer positions in several international and domestic standards bodies, including those in ISO TC 307 for blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, and he is currently working with NIST in its computer security division. As well, at NIST, he serves as the standards coordinator and liaison for its cybersecurity standardization efforts. Sal, welcome. Happy Friday.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for being with us and for roping Dylan into service today as well, and thank you for your service as an officer in the blockchain committee.
Thanks, David. And to complete the introduction, I'm glad that Dylan is here with me because we kind of complement each other. Dylan is the part of the technological knowledge of blockchain. I bring the other aspect, the standardization side of the story. So I hope together we can provide all the information you may like to hear.
Very good. Well, maybe you can start off by telling us about your role as an officer. As I understand that there's an international aspect to your role in the committee where you interact with other countries. Help us to understand the sort of the Venn diagram of how in the whole wide world where every country is interested in this topic, what organizations are present, what countries are present, how do you interact with them? Just give us a snapshot.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it's a very, very important question. A few years ago, when blockchain became popular, okay, there was a moment that pretty much any standard development organizations start developing on blockchain. ISO being one of the largest, probably the most relevant, the most famous, immediately triggered our attention. And at the beginning, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we see a large number of large organizations joining the space, the standardization space. In the past few years, I saw a phenomenon that is partially a surprise, but perhaps is not. Many of those large organizations, which already they develop in-house their own blockchain solutions, have been mostly silent, mostly quiet. This is not only in the US, this is an international aspect of this problem. And we see a lot of small organizations, often consulting organizations, representing governments or government institutions, start joining this effort. Of course, probably the major interest is the financial aspect of blockchain. So the digital currency, the cryptocurrency, there's in the back of their mind is always that interest. But today, blockchain standardization is still in an initial phase. So there's a need for defining the foundational standards, and that will become complicated because now they are trying to standardize general purpose standards, having in mind single aspect, small aspect of the problem. So I'm always glad when in the conversation, for example, with Dylan, with other techniques, when we try to put in a context what blockchain can do in general, but what standards might be needed to support this aspect. Before, in your introduction, talk about interoperability. Interoperability is an important aspect, even though somebody argued that blockchain is more, each blockchain system is kind of compatible with the people joining in that system. The idea of having interoperability in general seems foreign. On the other hand, now that the government has started interested in this aspect, I think having a minimum common denominator for everybody of security, of features, of terminology is important too. So this is an important moment, in my opinion, to be part of the effort for blockchain and DLT standardization. And at the same time, there's a risk of dispersing the energies in many committees and many small initiatives and projects. I know I was pretty much all over the places, but I would be happy to focus on any aspect you may want to investigate more.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Audience members, send us your questions. Two of the experts have been introduced so far. I like the topic that you broached around the special role of blockchain in finance. You know, things, of course, started out for blockchain with Bitcoin, which was the cryptocurrency. It still is the cryptocurrency. And we understand that Gartner has numbers that show that the value of blockchain taken broadly will exceed $176 billion by 2025, but ramping up to over 3 trillion by 2030. You know, that's a 1,500% increase in 5 or 6 years, you know. And it seems that speaking of Gartner, which has its model for the adoption of so many technologies, its hype cycle, it goes through the hype cycle into the trough of disillusionment, and then has a period of further adoption. Whether I wonder if that further adoption within the financial space will be broadly embraced, including by the USA, in the area of central bank digital currencies, so-called, you know, CBDCs. Are CBDCs part of the discussion in the committee?
Yes, so certainly. Yes, you brought a very good point. At the beginning, blockchain seems the panacea, the solution for any possible problem. then eventually less few use cases are becoming more of interest. And open little parentheses for the digital assets management that still has there's a lot of movement in that area, or the NFT, the non-fungible tokens. But my opinion, the largest interest will be in the world of the digital currencies. Even government outside to be directly involved. And yes, of course, even in I represent. You mentioned that I was in. I'm an officer. I'm a convener of one of the groups in ISO TC307, which is the ISO committee for blockchain. And this committee started about a year ago, an advisory group on digital currency in collaboration with another large ISO committee, TC68, which is financial services. So you can see the synergies. The financial world is looking at the blockchain as a possible platform, and blockchain as well is looking at what are the real use cases that can be used. In this area, in the digital currency, fortunately, the US is present. Has been a moment that, again, after the phase of blockchain solution of every problem, come this little disillusionment. So, but fortunately, in digital currency, US is present, and so it's providing contribution feedback. And I hope when from the initial phase of providing only idea will become actual start and actual work, I think we can be well positioned. So I'm glad for this kind of initiative like this roundtable to make known what is blockchain and what is happening in the standardization. But it's also a call for everybody to participate, to be involved, because some of those things will happen with or without us. They don't wait for us.
Right. I hear you. I feel like blockchain and distributed ledgers are an exception among technologies because they got out of the starting block so quickly, perhaps without the benefit of formal, transparent standardization work of experts in the horizontal practice of standardization, like yourself. And for that reason, there has been a terminology has been adopted that perhaps hasn't always used the best metaphors or most accurately reflected things. You know, the thing that comes to mind is terms like mining and proof of work and so forth that people don't always agree with. In hindsight is 2020, of course, and things happen so quickly and so organically that it wasn't really managed. And yet today, especially as things get serious around financial services, the inefficient structures, the fragmentation, and accurate terminology, not to mention the coordination among the committees that you mentioned has to be addressed. Well, let's thank you. Stick around. Let's bring Claire into the conversation. Claire Wischik, also on the committee. Thank you for serving on the committee, Claire. Claire is an Intel Fellow and CTO of Intel GGA. Her work focuses on hardware and network security, trusted computing, AI, privacy-enhancing technology, blockchain, some aspects of cryptography, and related global policy and trade issues. Claire is on the board of directors of the Trusted Computing Group and TDL, Trust in Digital Life, and co-chair of the IEEE effort on blockchain. She's an advisor on numerous international research and policy initiatives in different colleges in the US and in the United Kingdom. She served on high-level expert and advisory groups, including ENISA, the European Network and Information Security Agency. And Claire was among the researchers who introduced commonly adopted concepts, including risk engineering itself, that helped examine complex technology areas. Claire received her PhD from the University of Texas at Austin, Hook'em Horns, prior to joining Intel, she held leadership positions at Schlumberger Laboratory for Computer Science and AT&T Labs. Claire is also the author of numerous peer-reviewed papers, book chapters, editor of special issues of journals, and the UK Royal Society issue on blockchain, for instance, of several books, scientific journals, and also has 35 pending and issued US patents. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Claire.
Thank you so much for the invitation and including me in this discussion and for the introduction. I think our work on blockchain, and I'm talking about Intel and universities that we collaborated with, has started a long time ago. And at first, it focused in European activities. Europe has been very active in blockchain-related endeavors. For a while, 5G, artificial intelligence, and blockchain were the three pillars that would promote innovation and growth in European countries. When after considerable investment in research and even bigger investment in startups around the world, but also especially in Europe, everyone was a little bit surprised when the interest in this technology led to the emergence of the ISO groups early, when the finance part of the blockchain was active and operational. But other areas, well, for a while it appeared that blockchain can solve all the problems that we have. And literally, I heard this at one of the large conferences. This includes world hunger because of its potential influence on supply chain. So even though there was this belief in the abilities of blockchain to change both technical and societal approaches, it was relatively early to create a new committee for international standardization. But after several years of participation, I think it was a good idea. It was great to define this field that sort of emerged organically bottom up rather than research to a slow introduction to then fast commercialization and deployment. It was good to create an early approach to interoperability, to common vocabulary, common concepts, and generally make sense of blockchain in a way that befits, a system that was from the very beginning global. So I'm not going to talk about specific projects and areas of interest in blockchain, but I read one of the questions here. It asked two questions about the alternatives to proof of work. Well, you know that proof of stake was introduced as a new consensus protocol and has been preferred for a variety of reasons, but that also coincided with considerable efforts to break it and attempts to create new attacks that, well, against proof of stake. One of the reasons behind blockchain looking for potentially an alternative consensus protocol was it's a peer-to-peer system, and in a peer-to-peer architecture, more energy is always expended. There are additional benefits, of course, but the energy efficiency side has always been a concern. And so the proof of stake offers some answer to this, and that was one of the reasons to design it. But other concerns, other responses to this concern probably could be considered separately. There is an effort where Intel is participating, but that is also led by Linux Foundation to look at how we can design a greener blockchain, not necessarily through energy efficiency of all the protocols first, but by using renewable energy to enable blockchain. So that is one of the approaches that has been used. A second approach is to look at energy efficiency and carbon footprint of the ecosystem components that form blockchain. This is comprising computers and network operations and data. It's quite well known that we spend as many cycles to transfer as to process, in many cases, significant size data sets. So there are additional areas where the researchers and many companies focus to decrease the carbon footprint of blockchain. I think this work will continue. One last thing to mention that is connected both to energy efficiency and to the model. Everyone is talking today about Web3, the dawn of decentralized computing, of which blockchain and cryptocurrencies are the first working applications, but many others can be considered. Many others have been implemented, although with more limited success, including supply chain, including manufacturing, including many other areas. So if we consider that we are watching the emergence of Web3, then the importance of standardization in blockchain becomes even greater. It's a very important work that we need to continue and to expand.
Thank you. Couple quick follow-up questions on the sustainability questions. Salvatore was mentioning the liaison, the function of liaisoning with parallel committees, and I was wondering, there is a SC39 related to data center efficient IT sustainability and resource efficient data centers. Is that one of the committees that is being liaised with?
Well, potentially all the committees, well, including the committees that are looking at, carbon footprint accounting and specifications and standards associated with the greenhouse protocol that most companies and countries are using for carbon footprint accounting. Liaising with them, understanding what they're doing is very important. But data center is a cloud-based kind of framework, whereas blockchain, not purely anymore, but predominantly tends to be a peer-to-peer. So while incorporating the knowledge from this committee will be very important, probably additional efforts need to be linked in that have greater understanding of the peer-to-peer frameworks.
And do you consider the effort of Vitalik Buterin to move Ethereum to proof of stake? Do you consider the effort important and successful? As far as it appears now, it was successful, but time will show. And I think it was worthwhile, yes. Yes, very good. Well, thank you. Please hang on. And panelists are also welcome to pose questions to one another. I know that moving targets these days, and we don't always have a chance to meet and discuss with each other. So you're welcome to post questions to one another as well in this forum. We'll be interested in what you want to know from one another. So let's now bring into the conversation the CEO and co-founder of Wishnish, Elisa Goose, is founder and Wishnish is a distributed ledger technology company responding to global need for transparency, democracy, and accessibility. Elisa's entire career of working in the tech industry as a founder, change maker, and advisor, combined with her extensive experience in marketing and business strategy, has led to the creation of the Knish.io platform, distributed ledger platform, and inspired transformative technological innovation. As a female founder, Elisa saw firsthand the challenges encountered by entrepreneurs across multiple verticals, forming the inspiration for what eventually became the cutting-edge solutions offered by Wishnish, which are being used by key organizations, both in the nonprofit sector and across a wide range of commercial enterprises. Welcome, Elisa. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
So tell us, I invite you to tell us about Knish.io and what makes it unique in the world of distributed ledgers, and do you have a view on the terminology question, the distinguishing elements between blockchain and distributed ledgers and the other terms we've discussed?
You know, I really love that question. Just today we had a conversation about what really blockchain is, and especially what Bitcoin, for example, is in relation to the larger construct of distributed ledger technologies. And we really, I kind of went back with an old chestnut I was using back in 2016. To me, Bitcoin and really blockchain is what Gmail or Yahoo Mail is to the larger ecosystem of the internet. DLT is something that serves the function of bringing trust and transparency and bringing diverse types of data into a single data lake. While blockchain is doing it in a very streamlined manner, which I think really does work well for something like Bitcoin. By the way, do you know it's actually its birthday in about 2 days?
Yeah.
I think it came out on Halloween in 2008.
Isn't that
The
interesting?
white paper, yeah. But you know what it does well, and as a financial instrument and potentially a store of value, it's great. And I think a lot of blockchains have really followed the same design principle, just because they were building on the shoulders of a giant, and that's fine. But I think as we're talking about ways of using it in enterprise and differentiating the data, other approaches are needed.
Very
And as
good.
for what we bring ourselves into it, well, you know, I'm not a technical founder. And to me, I think it's really the need to make it easy for people who are not technical, but who see the value in and new ROIs that are possible through the use of distributed ledgers to be able to provide the same kind of ease you would engage with when it comes to other forms of information management.
So Knish.io, it is a platform that helps people stand up different use cases. Are there, in the standards world, we talk about reference architectures and reference implementations, which to startup companies and scale up companies, it means, you know, in a successful example that can be repeated or scaled. Do you have any that you're at liberty to share? I know that you probably have tight privacy with many of your customers, but are there any that you can share with or without naming the names of the clients?
Well, one use case that I really love is with Silicon Harlem, and that is a use case that is working directly with the city of New York, and it's authority that is really NYCHA, and it's authority that deals with people with low income and in their ability to have housing. And so in our case, what we're doing is helping them monetize the creation of 5G infrastructures across those NYCHA neighborhoods by creating a marketplace for local businesses to be able to stay competitive with the likes of Amazon, and for those captive portals, then bringing the funding in to be able to build the 5G infrastructure, which would then feed into those captive portals. So it's a really another use case I really love is, doing that what we're building right now for geek homes. And it's in beta, but I can speak about it. And in fact, the CEO is going to be speaking to over 500 leaders in because he was invited to do specifically about what it's doing to transform real estate industry. And we happen to be at the bottom of it, providing the back end to create the new wealth and liquidate wealth for a large swath of residential real estate and bring new strength into the ecosystem.
Is that like about fractionalization of real estate investment, or?
Of not real estate investment, but real estate appreciation rights, where you're not actually selling off the right to have 10% ownership in your pool, but in fact 10% of what the value of the property is like once you're able to, sell it. So this is a way, there is actually almost 30 trillion in just residential real estate in the US, and people are unable to unlock it. So what the founder is calling it is living poor and dying rich. And that's what the paradigm he's looking to shift. And we happen to be at the ground floor of it. So I think if there is one use case that I hope stays long after we're gone, is that giving people the right to, create more wonderful things with what they already own.
That's interesting. Certainly major investors tap the values of their assets in efficient ways at scale, and perhaps the democratization of access to capital happens through this mechanism that you're talking about. But what about other aspects of democratization? There is so much turmoil in the world. Here on K Street, we have enjoyed seeing the people who are protesting in solidarity with democracy activists in Iran. Of course, don't even get me started about the sham referenda in areas of Ukraine that have been taken over. Is there a role for the use of your Knish.io platform in those direct forms of democratization?
Oh, you just touched something that has been a dream project of mine. So anyone who wants to work with me on that, please, let's talk. And that is about bringing through blockchain-enabled voting onto the ecosystem. We really need to give power back into people's hands, and to do it in a way that's safe and transparent. And yes, there are actually a ton of ways you can engage with the blockchain, and in fact, a ton of ways you probably never thought of. When you sit down behind the wheel of a car, do you really look at how your combustion engine is working or how your electric batteries are functioning? What's important is how it gets you there and that it's safe while you're doing so. And that is really what we feel blockchain ecosystems need to bring to the world. Responding to what Claire has put in as a question is why the adoption beyond finance has been slower than expected. And I think it's really because it's been so hard to get people to wrap their minds around something that is not potentially an immediate gain to their wallets, but a more slow, but yet I guess stable way to introduce the new ROIs. And if you're needing to put in a lot of outlay into building something, then you then will need to understand what it does. Well, in our case, what we're doing is focusing on business functions and then leaving the rest to the technology behind it.
That's interesting. I think, well, my opinion as the non-subject matter expert is that a company like yours can benefit from the standards, progress in the standards side in a couple of ways. One, by riding the wave of the standard and potentially contribute as well to the body of expertise, but riding the wave of standardization in this domain, but also with any standards, there are metrics that are created along the way. And if your firm's technology performs well against those metrics that come into use, then that's something that can contribute to your success.
I agree with that, but I think one thing we need to all focus on is defining what the metrics are and being careful not to fall on the metrics of success that used to be part of the Web 2.0 world, just the same as we couldn't possibly compare the performance and potentially the harm that comes with using cars, you know, as compared to riding horses. So I think we need to really be measured in our approach to creating those standards.
And speaking of harm, do you have an opinion about proof of work mining, and do you think that would you agree with the other panelists about the importance of shift to other means of incentivizing or paying for the hosting of distributed assets?
Yes, 100%. I completely agree with everyone here, but I will say that to your question about would I consider it a success in terms of the Ethereum migration to proof of stake, I will say technologically it seemed to have went off very well, so kudos to them. But I think ethically it has taken us back to pre 2008 days of the seminal white paper, because really what we're doing is breeding oligarchy in the very DNA of the ledger. And you know, yes, we really need to focus on ways we are less harmful to the environment. And there are actually a lot of conversations about how the heat produced could potentially, from the using the traditional Bitcoin mining, can offset the problems to the environment. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. But I think the proof of stake emphatically should not be it. Where it comes to Nakamoto coefficient, where it comes to, and that's what I'm talking about, the resilience of the technology against potential attacks, but also in terms of the business and ethical usability of this migration. But of course, happy to debate.
Very interesting. So we're getting a few questions rolling in. Let's see. Here's a question addressed to Dylan and to Sal. But please stick around and please feel free to pose your questions to the members of the standards committee, and you may get some questions too, since you are a practicing innovator in this space, and we're so honored to have you here today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay, question to Dylan and Sal on ISO TC 307. ISO TC 307 has operated for a few years and has many successes behind it. What would you say has worked, and what could be done better? And what does the future look like in ISO TC 307? Sal, Dylan, can you take that one?
Yes, I can take it. I think probably you to unlock my video. Yes, okay, I can do that now. Okay, thank you for all the panelists, and thanks Claire for this question. I can give my perspective on TC307, and of course Dylan can add. What has worked in TC307? When this plethora of standardization effort started in again, not only in ISO, in many SDOs, the characteristic was that it was a kind of a grassroots effort. So there was not a big organization with already every standard already in place. So just to have those standards kind of blessed by ISO or by any other body. So there was a lot of small organizations, even sometimes individuals or universities come up with their own ideas. So initially there was this numberless of efforts, okay, they started. Now, paradoxically, what was a good thing at the beginning, so that create interest, so create a proliferation of many working groups, became also quote unquote the little dragging of the whole process, in the sense that today, after 5-6 years of this adventure in ISO 37007, I can see that what probably can be done better, what's still missing, is the idea of a real use case. We have many use cases. Some of those are so narrow, so specific, so little that probably will not require a standard, an international standard to be addressed. So I said what is probably needed is major use cases, and financial is the first one come to mind, but we hear already today other ideas, but whatever they are, something that might be of general interest. And so around those use cases, family of standards, effort of standardization can be generated. Again, it's happening now with digital currencies, which per se is not specific of blockchain and DLT, so it's more generic, but it's a beginning. But I think can be done much more in this space. And Dylan, if you want to add anything on this, please.
Had to find the buttons. So yeah, so ISO TC307's had a lot of good stuff, a couple standards published or technical reports and whatnot over the years. But one of the things I feel that it could do better is to essentially sell itself to the individual developers and stuff out there. Because right now we do have universities, academia, government agencies, and industry people, but a lot of the stuff that's being done with blockchains and cryptocurrencies, whatnot, are volunteers, individuals out there. And a lot of them don't see a benefit to standardization whatsoever. I've been to blockchain conferences when the topic of standardization was brought up, the audience booed. And that was a fun time for me. I sort of slumped down in my seat so no one started yelling at me, but it's really, it could, the whole process could benefit from more participation by these experts who are out there, and they could also benefit by realizing that there are upsides to having things standardized. So I think that's something that could be done better.
Another question on the topic of better. The question is about faster. How can things be sped up? Question is directed to you guys at NIST, and as well to Lisa, specifically within the context of finance and the finance industry. Things are perceived as going slower than expected, and how can things be how can adoption be accelerated?
Lisa, do you want to go first, or I can start with my perspective?
Yeah, I would love for you to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, go for it.
No. I would love to go
Oh,
to
okay,
hear
okay.
your perspective. Yes, please.
Okay, I think Dylan already partially answered to this question. As happened in this standardization effort, there was a little bit putting the horse before the cart. So there was an attempt to create standards of beginning of standard on governance, on interoperability, on smart contract, on foundational standards like framework and terminology, without having the clear application behind them to support. So this has been a little bit or kind of a disappointing. I heard many players in the industry, many players were supposed to be either the developer or the adopter, were a little bit surprised by this start. So I go back to my initial point. So having a clear use case and then have a clear engaging with the actual implementer and adopter of this technology would have been a good way to start. So I think in this case, in this sense, and unfortunately, I see also not only in ISO, I'm following many other committees like IEEE or ITUT. I see again this proliferation or this fragmentation of standards, but I'm not sure if they are really addressing some major need that would then drive the adoption. So difficult to answer the question, Claire. From my perspective, because I'm a standard person, so I'm more apt to make standards. But I think there is a need for the industry, from the drivers, from the stakeholders, to come to the standardization organization and ask and be more vocal in what really needed. Because has been working a little bit in the vacuum. Lisa, please complete it.
Claire, do you want to go first? Or?
After you.
Okay.
Please begin.
So yeah, thank you. So well, I think I have to really agree with Sal. I think we were so hit by all the issues around ICOs, around the speculative aspect of what the technology can represent in our lives, that we have jumped headlong into trying to define standards almost as a knee-jerk reaction to saying like, hey, see, we can't be like a normal industry. We have our standards. But the thing is, you need to have both a use case and the application of those standards and how they're going to affect its adoption, whether they're too stringent or they're not stringent enough. And so I think if you come to it from a more holistic perspective of why they're here in the first place, the longevity of their adoption will be a lot higher. Claire, please.
Claire, your thoughts?
Yeah, those are great comments from my side. I think TC307 followed a trajectory that many similar committees follow. Understand what is there, understand how to make sense of the area broadly, how to build consensus. What I think should happen next that will be very useful for industry is to move to interoperability and technical components, create standards, APIs, maybe create some improvements, look at specific cryptography issues. And granted, we have a different committee that focuses on cryptography, but there is nothing there that is optimized for blockchain. So maybe some collaboration project in this area is good. As blockchain attempts to enter other fields beyond finance, we can see that something simpler than a full set of elements that we call blockchain might be very useful. Something that is auditable, something that preserves a record of transactions that's immutable would be extremely helpful. So maybe just hash chain that is optimized for performance in different environments without additional protocols could be another area to pursue. And I know that it will find many applications in areas such as document management for documents like titles, such as supply chain related applications, especially for digital chains and digital products, and many others. So what I would do at this point is maybe create some kind of, a symposium where the standards body leaders could talk to practitioners, a conference or a workshop, and get their wish list and then implement it where it makes sense.
We have a practitioner who is expert in wishes with us today. Elisa, your thoughts on acceleration?
Oh my God, I love this. I was just about to say, Claire, yes. Where can I sign up for that symposium? I have a huge wish list, and more importantly, I think my CTO can give you his. Because especially at the beginning, we felt like we were operating really in a vacuum, but we wanted to be, as we are sort of wanted to be quantum resistant and future proof. So we wanted to be future proof in the way we built our tech. But are we the only ones? And who's doing what? And how can we standardize it? Sign us up.
David, may I add something here?
Please.
Yes, thank you. And yes, I enjoyed the conversation between Claire and Lisa. There is already an opportunity, in my opinion, to start working on this kind of concept. There is in TC307, there is one working group working on interoperability. Now, they started with a project very, very broad, so broad that, in my opinion, would be not even feasible. Okay, they want to interoperate everything with everything else. Okay, so is that there's a dream, but instead the concept of interoperability is important. And Claire was explaining why there can be something that could drag the industry. So perhaps this moment that rather than being this work on interoperability and intellectual academic concept, perhaps so this is an invitation to organization like Lisa, yours, or even Claire, to participate and bring down the earth this effort and try to make it useful for example, perhaps not for every possible implementation or aspect, but at least start selecting area where interoperability, first of all, can be achieved. Second, is useful.
Let's talk about, let's switch topics and talk about another question that's come up to us. If you're watching it, please feel free to send your questions in. This is about the dark web and this how do we protect against the use of blockchain technologies, the illicit use for enabling illicit use using cryptocurrency, which is often associated with the dark web and illicit use. Is that a fair criticism at all? And to what extent is the anonymity that is built into some blockchain something that can be protected? How do we defend against illicit use with anonymous cryptocurrencies? Any volunteers to take on that question?
I can start, and I'm sure everyone can comment additionally. When I hear about illicit use and concerns about blockchain, I remember the situation with the World Wide Web itself in the 1990s. As an undergraduate, I attended a conference about the first business applications on World Wide Web. And they came from legitimate banks and other organizations. Some of them were new, like Amazon was there, still a very new company, not a large one, selling books. But what was remarkable is when the questions were asked about who was actually using the web, the majority were the users that we would frown upon. I am mentioning this because it's typical at the infancy of a new model of something really large. World Wide Web was a new way of doing business. Blockchain offered a way to, do payments without the third-party intermediary. Those are all big things. They are frequently adopted at first by the nimble group of people who misuse this technology. This doesn't indicate to me the prospects of the technology. it is incumbent on us, technologists and people in governments and people in other organizations to form frameworks where it will be very difficult to operate illegally. And at this point, we have already made inroads to make it more complicated. There is an approach to do taxation for cryptocurrency, which is relatively strong. When attacks happened to Colonial, for instance, it was possible for the government to track and block the blockchain payments associated with unfreezing this very important operational applications. So I think a lot more needs to be done, but it will be true if we meet in 10 years that the illicit use of cryptocurrency, whatever it is at that point, probably not Bitcoin, will be significantly reduced, although there are always illegal uses of financial instruments, as we all know, but hopefully it will be minimized. So I think it's a technical problem, it's a regulatory problem, it's an international collaboration and harmonization problem, but it is not a reason to outlaw blockchain in finance. It, however, was a reason to slow it down. We now have 9 countries that prohibit it, 15 countries that mostly prohibit it, and I guess only 1 country that uses it completely as a legal tender. That would be El Salvador. So not where we thought we would be 10 years ago when we started working on it.
Thank you. Other opinions on this vector of innovation toward making it safer to use for societies?
Would love to say something. I really like the class response, and I think I will add one more. If you make the use of, say, digital currencies that are backed by the government systems that implicitly trusted more commonplace, then I think it's going to also remove the temptation to use the currencies that are not considered as holistic. So to me, it's both a carrot and a stick approach. Yes, we might try to outlaw, we might try to create roadblocks to adoption, but the thing is, it's just a rat race. The more we are going to create, say, technological response as a deterrent, the more we're going to be looking for yet another means. Because let's face it, dark web existed and was monetized long before cryptocurrencies really became a major thing. So if you give us an alternative to use, I think that's what we're probably going to go after.
Interesting. Other thoughts, or shall we go to the next question? All right. Okay. We've talked about some of the primary use cases, but there are myriad niche use cases that people don't know about. This ability to inject algorithm and logic into transactions and NFTs and things like this. There are use cases that people really even haven't heard of. I learned recently that in the court case of Paul Manafort, as evidence was being surfaced, there was such concern over much of this digital evidence not being tampered with along the way. So essentially, they used a blockchain system to timestamp information as soon as it was revealed and introduced as evidence, so that there could be a chain of custody and some hygiene around the treatment of digital evidence. But what other little known blockchain and distributed ledger use cases do you know about? In particular, if you were thinking of an ideal use case for blockchain implementation that doesn't have broad adoption right now, what might it be, and what do you suggest could be done to boost the success of it taking root. And thank you, Elisa, very much for that question. To the other panelists. Yes, Dylan.
So I forget exactly which company is putting this forward, and it's something I'll have to look into. But the use case that I always thought was a really good one was the tracking of charity donations, because you constantly hear about people donate to charities and they don't know if it's being actually used for what the charity says it's supposed to be using the funds for, or if someone's funneling the money off. Sometimes they are, and it's, you know, a fake charity. But this solution was proposed. You could watch your donation and track it through the entire life cycle down to who got the disbursement of whatever goods they were paying for. And so I always thought that was a really interesting one. So just because we donate a lot of charity here. And I would like to know who we're helping directly, and that would make me want to donate more, and to have that knowledge that it was going to where it should go. So that's one. I don't know how we could get more into that, but that's always been a use case, a favorite one.
I hear what you're saying. It's not so much for the sort of a Patreon use case where you're donating directly to someone and they're the recipient. It's more where you have an aggregator, and then that aggregator purports to be assigning those funds to different recipients. That's a good one. Other thoughts, Claire, Sal?
I think there are many areas where blockchain can make a difference. One of the earliest implementation by guard time for the government of Estonia was, looking and tracing title documents, including titles over time. Estonia has undergone many transformations. It was part of the Russian Empire, then independent country, then part of the Soviet Union, then an independent state, then member of the European Union, which is associated with the change in legal requirements and how title information was rendered. So linking it all and being able to follow it through and be aware of all transactions historically was very useful for that country. And since then, many similar applications were put together. Another example is in automotive, for instance, looking at how the connection between the imperfection of terrain and response by the system during self-driving and during the human driving of the vehicle to provide an immutable record for various purposes. Sometimes as evidence, but mostly for improvement and optimization purposes. Another area that I think is very interesting and is very much talked about in Europe is privacy. Blockchain, because of how it is put together, allows a little bit of a better way to implement everyone's dream, user-controlled privacy and security. And there are many startups in Europe that are looking productively, I should say, in this direction. There are some areas that are not appropriate for blockchain. Since we were talking about privacy and European activities, there was a lot of interest in implementing the right to forget with blockchain. But of course, blockchain is an immutable record, right? That's where its value lies. So it's possible to implement a replication outside of Ethereum, for instance, to try to forget what is in the main blockchain in, for instance, the Ethereum. But this is probably not a productive direction for blockchain. It's completely orthogonal to its
GDPR.
design and its architecture.
I heard about that. Yeah, the insertion of GDPR non-compliant information into the blockchain.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
I'd love
good.
to respond to that. And actually, that's specifically one of the reasons why we introduced the standards into our technology, meaning we are actually GDPR and HIPAA compliant out of the box. And why we are working in medical use cases right now is that we are actually focused on being able to really trim. See, behind me, you would see the way we envision our technology. And that is more as a World Wide Web rather than a blockchain. And that gives us an ability to launch micro ledgers where you're exchanging the private information, and then an ability to remove it, leaving behind only a hash for verification purposes. And that is actually giving you an opportunity to provide the right to forget while still maintaining the interoperability and transparency of operating in distributed ledger technology. So I completely agree. It needs to be there. It just hasn't really gained the broad adoption because people didn't focus on it while, more focusing on speculative aspects. But I'm really glad to hear you speak about this need to make it a more useful and more accessible part of blockchain use.
Yes, if I may add here, I heard a lot of interesting possibilities. Yes, I'm sensitive that one thing what can be done with blockchain is different from what can be standardized for blockchain. Okay, and this I totally agree with you that when you look at standard is not in a competitors of technology. Standard should be serving the technology you're trying to adopt, and not because everything can be done is right to standardize. Something better to stay where they are, proprietary or probably in a smaller scale. But I was looking, for example, at the asset management, asset tracking, and so on. There are certain applications where there are benefits that can be exploited from blockchain. Others perhaps less for different reasons. Privacy is one of them, perhaps. But what again, the question is what blockchain can do. I step back. If the question is what the standards should do to increase the blockchain implementations, and then I think yes, there is a lot of to be done. And the first and foremost is important to identify what are the basis to build a standard for blockchain. So as I said before, use cases, and so what are the constraints, and what is the population will be using these standards, and is still an open issues. I don't see a solution yet. So it's difficult for me to answer the question. What would be beside financial, without the money, basically to say what could be another application, because many other applications implementation they always hit the obstacles of all the limitation that you were mentioning.
Very good. So Lisa, you mentioned that you're not using a blockchain exactly, that it's a distributed microledger. If we go back to the discussion of the sustainability question, how does your niche.io platform, how does it solve the problem of hosting, and is it a proof of work or proof of stake or something else? Oops, I think you may be muted. Yes.
Perfect question. And I think we need to kind of go back to, I think what Sal was mentioning.
Yep.
Is the applicability. Like, do you really need to decentralize everything? Because I think that was a big thing when people were jumping into blockchain, but there is two issues to consider. One, privacy. And second is also, do you really need all the data? Because we are kind of hoarding it like we're hoarding cats. And so I think that really contributes to a lot of the pricing and competitiveness issues in the ecosystem. And also about ways to differentiate which streams of data need to be private and which can live in the consortium and which can live in a broader sense of decentralized ledger, which is accessible worldwide. And I think once we are able to solve it, which I think we did, but there are actually others who are doing this, a lot of the interesting things as well, then I think some of the issues just fall off. But there is one other thing I want to bring up, and that has nothing to do with blockchain and everything to do with the way that we are so reliant on cloud right now. Now, I will preface in saying that I think AWS did do a right decision ethically by kicking out Parler, given on all the issues that were going on at the time. Yes, but at the same time, it really opened our eyes to the lack of resilience that we are building into any blockchain, unless you're holding on-prem. And if you get kicked out, what is it going to do to your use case? So it goes beyond escrow accounts. It really goes like software escrow accounts and really goes towards what do you do when no cloud provider is going to support you? And then you need to really look at the fragmentation of, I think, what's on each ledger and create mini ledgers with the groups you're working with, just so that at least there is longevity to your use case if something like that were to happen. Would love everyone's thoughts.
I think those are excellent premises to build our views on. The question is much more complicated, however. Yes, we rely on cloud and blockchain is built on decentralized architectures, but the architecture is changing. If you think about 5G implemented now, and especially 6G, there is much greater reliance on the edge. There is this concept introduced of edge clouds. I expect that there will be not in very distant future a much more decentralized architecture. Maybe it will connect edge devices in a way that will be like a cloud, but it will not be exactly a cloud. So another area, since we were talking about the regulatory environments that are important for blockchain, Lisa mentioned GDPR, is that for distributed, decentralized architectures like blockchain, we really don't have an approach. GDPR that was mentioned is talking about data owner, data controller, and data processor. But suppose we have permissionless public node that is available in two geographies, two completely different geographies, which is typical. Who is the data owner and who is the data controller and who is the data processor? This is a very simple example. There are many much more complex examples around it. And that is where I think standardization could really help, looking at simple cases at first to make sense of the whole environment is good, but creating a framework where cases like that, what do we do with this permissionless public node that's in different geographies that exists sort of in a cloud, but sort of in a decentralized environment? That is something where standards bodies could help very much by helping us generalize what we have. So I think the future is exciting, but it's much more complex than the past.
Very interesting, especially about edge clouds. I'm thinking about the mobile edge computing, mech to mech cloud architecture, and how that can be using blockchain distributed ledger technologies. Are you, Claire, by the way, are you writing IP around? You have so many patents in your portfolio. Are any of them relating to blockchain?
Well, blockchain is an interesting area, especially for unusual applications. So it's always, a source of great ideas. When you think about the applications that were mentioned here by the panelists, well, certainly IP could be written about specific instances of each of them. and there is already a considerable richness of IP in blockchain, and this will certainly continue.
Well, we're coming up to the end of our time. I wonder, do any of the panelists have anything that they would like to say by way of closing thoughts? We're so appreciative of your taking the time to share your perspective and expertise. It's so important, the work that's happening both on the innovative side as well as in the standardization side of things, coordinating the blockchain work with the other committees, the essentially enabling function of the standards work in addressing the fragmentation, the sustainability challenges, the security and privacy challenges that you've taught us about today, the interoperability challenges. So anyone want to bring us home?
I would like to thank you, David, for organizing the panel, for allowing us to discuss those issues in its aspects that are not very frequently discussed. Because blockchain as an area is so active, standardization does not frequently find a lot of time to be the foundation of a discussion about technology, societal issues, and various uses of blockchain. So thank you very much for organizing it. And I hope you put together many more panels where we can either join or listen to the experts in various fields. Thank you very much.
Well, you're most welcome. It's a great pleasure to spend the time with you. The people that do the hard work, not just for an hour and a half on a Friday, but day in and day out are these panel members. I would also like to mention Debbie Spittle, who is our Insights Committee Manager for the blockchain. She is taking care of her fold in a consistent way, as well as the officers, John Greaves, who we mentioned earlier, consistently contributing to this community, which is not just an hour on a Friday, but over many hundreds of hours and many trips and many calls. But thank you. Your thoughts are well appreciated. And this group provided a fantastic segue into the November discussion, because quantum resistance or quantum safe blockchain was mentioned, I believe, by Lisa, and that is that for sure is something that will come up in the discussion of quantum that we have scheduled for 2 p.m. on November the 10th.
Looking forward. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, happy Friday, all. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having us.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.